Hello and welcome to the All About Ability podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Kale Financial, specialists in mortgages and protecting your family's finances. Whether you're looking for the best mortgage for you or want to make sure you and your family aren't struggling if you're seriously ill or pass away, call Kale Financial on 0141 447 0290 or email advice@kale-financial.co.uk. I will include this information in the show notes.
I'm alright, fella. How are you?
I'm good. It's stressful time now, isn't it? But it's been fun actually researching you though, to be fair. You're quite an interesting person.
That'll be interesting. Oh, Jesus, I don't know about that. Jesus.
I found it really funny the way that you got into comedy was quite interesting to me because it was very much by chance by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
You just stumbled upon it. Can you tell me a bit about that and how that came about?
I mean, I always like comedy and always like telling jokes and having a carry on and that kind of stuff. But I never ever thought about ever doing it. And I had never, even at school or anything, had never done anything like amateur dramatics or anything like that. And basically, a friend of mine had received a stage 4 ovarian cancer diagnosis, and she'd been away travelling and she'd been diagnosed and she'd come back. And a mutual friend of ours, he was over at my house at the time, and it was about 3 a.m, and he kind of was like, oh, it makes you realise how lucky you are, and that you should scare yourself, you should seize the day kind of thing and scare yourself. And I was like, oh, I couldn't jump out a plane. And he said, oh, well, there's this stand-up comedy course that you can do, and at the end of it, you do a gig. I think we should do it because you've always made me laugh and I've always made you laugh. And I went, aye, that sounds fine. I went, something interesting someone can say about you at your funeral. And I was like, aye, okay. And we done the course, and at the first night of the course, it soon transpired that he'd wanted to do this course for about 5 years and totally hoodwinked me into doing it, right? And as we were going round the class, there were people who were like, yeah, I'm really into amateur dramatics, and yeah, I've always been funny, and yeah. And they got all the way around to me, and they were like, so Susie, what? And I was like, well, can I just come with him? It's kind of a bit of a dare. And they were like, right. And they're like, so what have you done on a stage? And I was like, never been on a stage. And they're like, right. They're like, what about like school shows? Did you do stuff at school? And I was like, no. They're like, what about like even like the nativity? And I was like, listen, I wasn't even in the nativity even as a kid. I was like, it's just never been a thing. And I actually remember saying to the lecturer, who's now a mate of mine, Viv G, saying, I don't think I've ever held a microphone before. Like, I don't think I've ever done that. And she was like, right. And you could see the rest of them going, fuck, like, what's she doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's she doing here? Do you know what I mean? And I was like, aye. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. Like, I'd done the course and I'd done the first gig, and then I went back and I'd done the second course, and I'd done more, and then I just kept getting gigs, and then just realising how much I really enjoyed doing it, and it seemed to be quite agreeable with me, and it seemed to be something that I thought I could pursue. So I did, but I didn't. I did, and I kind of worked my way like through the ranks. But it was just something that just kind of just fell into. But you find that with a lot of comedians, a lot of people just kind of stumble upon it. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of people who kind of plan to go into comedy, a lot of the time I'm not very good at the comedy bit. Do you know what I mean? But the actual, the more you kind of talk to people, especially like people who are way like successful, they've kind of just stumbled on it by total chance. Do you know what I mean? And they go,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute. This is like the thing that I've been looking for that I don't have, that loads of people have, and I could never really connect with it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's really interesting how it all kind of comes about. Sometimes something that you're natural with can just kind of fall in your lap like that. Like,
Aye.
it's especially with comedy because it's such a harsh industry in some ways. Obviously, with like in the way of like you're right in front of everybody. If anything goes wrong, you're bombing. I've heard comedians describe what it's like when it just doesn't go to plan, and it's like a horrible feeling. And
oh yeah, I mean, it's an absolute, like, it's a solo sport. Like, it's very much a solo sport. Like, if you're in a band and you're on bass and you hit a few bump notes, there's a rhythm guitarist, there's a lead singer, there's a drummer, there might even be like a keyboard that can kind of cover up for your bum note, and it's only you and them that really know that you've hit that. The audience won't be like, wait a minute, stop the song, that was terrible. Whereas, you go and something doesn't land, it's very apparent that it has not landed. You know what I mean?
really,
And it's only you on that stage. It's only you there that can make it happen one way or another.
yeah, and I guess that's what makes it such an enjoyable thing to watch, because if somebody can do something that everybody technically can try, if they can do it well, they must be really good at it. Do you know what I mean?
Aye, and I think there's also that thing from an audience where even if you're dying, right, providing you're not kind of arrogant or cocky and you're like, oh, they're just not my audience. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you've got that about you, you shouldn't do it. But I think if you've got something about you where you just come across as a decent human being, 99% of the population will be like, oh man, this is really uncomfortable, and I feel for them, because in their head, that's their worst thing imaginable. Public speaking, but not just public speaking where you're trying to invoke a reaction, and that reaction's laughter, which is a really hard reaction to invoke. You know what I mean? Like, the amount of times you come off a stage and there's that one guy who's sat like glum-faced all night, hasn't flinched for one comment, and they come up to you and they go, what a night I had. I laughed from beginning to end. And you're like, tell your face. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's that. It is that kind of thing. But yeah, it is very much, I think most people will respect you for even just trying it and doing it, because it plays into so many of their fears. Do you know what I mean? You can see people literally having an anxiety dream while they're awake, watching someone die on a stage,
The thing about the comedy scene that I find interesting is it's such a diverse group of people. I was talking to Darren Cornell about this, and he was saying how, you go into comedy and you meet such like different people from different backgrounds and all these kind of things. Was it a scary thought in the sense of, like, there's always this idea, especially in Glasgow, Scotland, it's just kind of like everybody's very at each other all the time. It's a very divided sort of city, I feel like. And I always think that did you ever worry about the idea of that old saying of like, oh, women can't be funny, and did you encounter like?
Oh, aye, but in my life, like, so I worked in a gay bar in the late 90s, early 90s, and I became assistant manager. And I went from glass collector to assistant manager. And in that pub, especially, in fact, there's probably actually more now, but that was a real male-dominated environment. That was a real, because a lot of single guys would live in the town, they would come into the pub after work, have a couple of pints, go up the road, whatever. Whereas women by nature tend not to do that, right? That doesn't tend to be a thing that women do. And so that was a male-dominated environment. And gay bars generally are male-dominated environments. And then I was an electrician, right? So I worked in construction. So there wasn't many female electricians when I was an electrician. And then I became an estimator, which part of the electrical thing. So I've always worked in male-dominated industries. And even as a kid growing up, I always used to play football. So I'm 41, right? I'm 41 tomorrow. And I remember at school, like, when we'd go outside for, like, PE, and they'd say, right, boys play football, girls play netball. I would always go and play football, and the teacher would literally be dragging me with the neck. So I think I've always had that thing about well, you can't tell me that I can't do this because I'm a woman. Because that's, like, I think even from being a kid, like my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who I was really, really close to my whole life, was a really fiercely independent woman. Like, she would wallpaper and paint, and she wouldn't think twice about getting a screwdriver out to fix something, mainly because my grandfather was absolutely handless. Like, he was useless. So I think I kind of grew up seeing that and thinking, seeing that a woman can't do something is the most ludicrous thing that I've ever heard. Do you know what I mean? I think that was genuinely a thought in my head as a kid that I just thought, what do you mean I can't play football? What do you mean I can't play computer games? What do you mean I need to play with dolls and prams? Like, my dad talks about one Christmas, I think it must have been like 3 or 4, and they got me like a Silver Cross pram and a doll. And I just could not have been any less interested. I was like, aye, whatever. I'll be playing with my brother's skill electrics or whatever. And then he talks about another Christmas. I was maybe about 5 or 6, and he took me into M&S, Marks and Spencer's, to get my Christmas Day outfit, right? And, it's Christmas Eve or the 23rd of December, whatever, and he's got me in, he's trying to get me my Christmas Day outfit, and I'm just like, is that a dress? I'm not wearing a dress. Like, at 5 and 6 years old, so I think I had a very strong sense of I'm not being told, and it wasn't an anti-guy thing or anything. I just wasn't being told by the world that I couldn't do stuff because I was a girl, because that just doesn't make sense. Do you know what I mean?
Completely, and that's essentially what this whole podcast is about. And I mean, from the way that you just described it, the same way I feel about being in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And how it's like you grow up and people say, you can't do this and you can't do that. And you're like, well, why can't I do this? You know what I mean? And so...
Still get 2 arms. Do you know what I mean? Still, I'm not blind and I'm not deaf and I'm not mute, so I can still do loads of stuff. Do you know what I mean? I just don't have legs like a lot of people's legs work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and some people that have had the most severe disabilities have done the most inspiring things, like Stephen Hawking and things like that.
Well, there was a man who literally couldn't do anything and had a degenerative illness, wasn't it? It was a degenerative disease, which took him from being, and I don't like to say it in this context, but normal, and I'm doing the inverted commas a la Neil Lennon style, right? But normal to then to not be that, but still have that brain and that capacity. And I mean, I don't think you can write anyone off. I mean, the day that we're recording this, an hour ago, I just sat and watched Kamala Harris take the oath of vice president. The first woman to hold that office, the first black woman, the first Asian woman. And that's just another ceiling smashed. And I think that's what you just always need to think of. And and it's not even something that I've harboured and carried with me. It's just a very matter of fact thing that I just think, because you do get that. You do get that whole, like, when you're a woman, like a guy might get a minute on stage to impress the audience and you might get like 20 seconds. But if you're good enough, you'll get over that. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Definitely. And if that guy doesn't want to like you because you're a woman or thinks you're funny for a woman, his opinion doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? If that's how he goes, however, in general terms, and being 100% honest about this, it's never guys that say that. It's always women.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, I done a show about domestic disaster and about moving back home with my parents, and I spoke about internalised misogyny in the family and how women treat other women and how appalling we treat other women. Like, and even just the mindset of who women are. Like, so, it starts off at home that a mum will tell her daughter that she's fat, but never tell her son. We'd never say to her son, "You're fat," but we'll say to the daughter, "You're fat. You've put on weight. You better watch that." Like if you don't get that under control, a man will never pick you off the shelf as if it's 1954. Do you know what I mean? So it kind of starts there. And then you bring in the kind of societal teenage norms and everything that most girls go through. And then you start to look at magazines. You start to look at magazines. So this is where the divergence occurs between girls and boys. Boys are going to computer magazines and football magazines, whatever they want to read. And girls' magazines are very much fashion, music, like all that kind of stuff. And that's absolutely fine if that's what those girls are into and that's what they read. But then it becomes a thing going, this is what girls are wearing. This is who you should look like. This is whose hair you should be doing this. And this is since time immemorial. And this gets fed in. And then you've also got that thing that women do to each other. And this is where it plays out and like for me as a comedian. Women do that thing where they're like, oh my God, who done her makeup? Like, was it a dog with a lipstick? Like, what's happened to her face, right? Guys will never turn up and look at a guy and go, do you think about shaving today, mate? Like, because you don't even notice. It doesn't register on your radar because it just doesn't. It's just not a thing because you haven't been brought up like that. And it was funny. I was reading a thing. It was a pure trashy thing. And it was about a woman attacking another woman in a playground down south. And the first two words she shouted at her was, "You're a fat mess." And I thought, that's very interesting. Like a guy would say, "You're an F and B, you're an F and P, do you know what I mean? It would just be a throwaway swear. But the woman goes straight on the attack. And the first thing she does is wait and looks. And that's what women do. And then, like, you come off a stage, and I promise you this, right? And this was in an actual show that I done this whole bit, where I'll come off a stage, and it is never a guy. It's always a woman going, normally I don't find a woman funny, but see you, you're the exception to that rule. And I was like, oh, do you know what? Normally I find women attractive, but you know what? You're the exception to that rule, right? And you know, and that's very much a thing. That's very much how women treat other women. So as much as you will get the odd guy going, oh, blah, 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 I don't really find women funny. The majority of the time, it's women, which is kind of fascinating, and I hope I've kind of explained where that comes from. You know what I mean? That comes from mothers, aunties and grannies saying, you're fat.
So it's this idea of, like, do you think women are brought up to think of themselves in a certain way to the point that if you're doing stand-up comedy, they can all look at you and go, you shouldn't be doing that. You're not fit into the box you're supposed to be in.
Oh, I mean, I think there's probably a generation of women who think that. Yeah, I think there probably is. I mean, thankfully it's changed a lot and all that. But I mean, even that whole idea of, you know, that you get handed tiny tears when you're 3 years old, do you know what I mean? That's your role. It's just silly. Do you know what I mean? But I definitely think there is women's attitudes. I mean, like, again, this was in the same show where I spoke about how when a husband or a brother or a son goes into their mother's, their auntie's or their grand's house, they literally become incapacitated. Like, it's not his fault. It's the mother's fault, because the mum's like that. Are you hungry? I'll rustle you up a snack. 2 minutes later, there's a hog roast on the table. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, what? Whereas a woman walks into her mother's house and it's, put the kettle on, make me a cup of tea, would you? It's a very different thing. Or the son doesn't have to take his plate into the kitchen. Now, he lives in a house with a woman where he will stack the dishwasher. He will empty the dishwasher. He will stand at a sink and do dishes. But when he goes into his mother's house, the mother expects the girlfriend or the daughter-in-law to pick up his plate and take it into the kitchen. It's a very generational thing as well, you know. And then that woman gets judged if she does or if she doesn't, not realising that a 22-year-old woman has been brought up to believe that her 22-year-old boyfriend's more than capable of taking his own plate into a kitchen.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you think that we can actually like try and change that more so? Like, because it seems like a very broad issue, but at the same time, with all this talk of equality and equal rights and all that, you still have a big, large proportion of people that are very discriminatory against women's rights and things like this.
I don't even think they're even being particularly discriminatory. I think it's just a habit, right?
Yeah.
So for me, so I'm an auntie, right? So my brother has got a little baby who's a boy and a little girl who is a toddler, just kind of coming up to kind of preschool. And my partner has got she's got two kind of older nephews who have got their own stuff going on, but we've got a 9-year-old and two 6-year-old boys. And when they come and stay, and we see them pretty regular. So if they come and stay and then they do stuff, the girl's obviously older, so it's very easy to say, can you do this and can you do that? But what we tend to do is so for example, if the kids are staying and I cook them, say, pancakes for breakfast, right? The 9-year-old girl will come in and help with that because that's what she wants to do, right? And that's totally fine. I make sure the boys say thank you. But when the boys are finished, they take their plates into the kitchen. You know, they don't hand them to her. Like, you need to go and take that in. Go and put that in the bin. Can you go and put that in the kitchen for me, please? Thank you very much. And they get spoken to the same way. And they do the same stuff. Now, I appreciate there's a difference in height, so, you know, they maybe can't reach the sink. But there's no harm, in my opinion, in the world. I kind of would like them to grow up in that they don't see there being any problem with them taking dishes into the kitchen or stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Now, granted, you've got that older sibling, younger sibling thing of the kind of just responsibility, and that's totally fine as well. But there has got to be a thing where the boys growing up know that they need to be able to cook, they need to be able to clean. And this is maybe another thing. My dad could cook, my dad could clean, my dad could iron, my dad could hoover. My dad didn't have a problem doing any of that. And my brother, who's 8 years older than me, was the exact same. Age 13, 14, Mark could stand and iron his own stuff and iron his shirts and stuff. So I think I probably grew up in a house where the men, because my dad was the youngest by 14 years, so I think just growing up, he had to grow up quite quick and be quite independent. And he very much wanted both me and my brother to be independent, to be able to do things. And the gender thing with regards to that stuff wasn't an issue. You know, a man being able to iron his shirt, my dad's like, I iron your shirt. Do you know what I mean? It's like, your mum's not going to stand and iron your shirt. You iron your shirt. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it wasn't a problem. Do you know what I mean? It was just one of those things. So, yeah, it was very much encouraged, and I genuinely try and do the same with the kids that are in my family. But you also see that's changed as well, because their mums are younger. So they're like, no way, son, on your way. Do you know what I mean? You're not getting brought up that you're going to be the breadwinner out working and your wife's making you a pretty home. Do you know what I mean? That the world's going to be different. So yeah, and I think it is changing. It's just that harnessing it, really.
Yeah, like you're constantly trying to build up the right sort of habits of actually being equal rather than just saying, it's one thing saying you want to have equality, but you actually have to act it out in your household as well.
But then you see, and then there's the other side, right? Where like, I wouldn't want a man to think that he had to go to the bar and get me a drink, right? I would be appalled if a man thought that. However, if I was in a bar and my mum was sat, my mum's not a drinker, but let's just say me, my mum, my dad, and my partner had went out for dinner and then a couple of drinks, there is no way on this earth would I let my mother walk to a bar and get a drink, because she's of a generation. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd be like, no. And it'd be the same with my partner's mum. Now, they might say, no, I'm getting the drink in and give me the money. And if that, like, because they're adamant about it, fine. But I still wouldn't send them up to the bar to get me a drink. Do you know what I mean? So there's also that kind of respect thing as well, isn't there, of just how you've been brought up and that kind of, because I'm of the generation that, you know, you gave your seat in your butt in the bus up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you feel like that's, with the way the world is right now, it seems like it's becoming more divided and more like everybody's sort of at each other's throats in a way?
I don't know if you've seen Joe Biden's inauguration speech, right?
I did see that.
I've been calling Joe Biden Papa Joe, right? Because he's like your papa, right? He's wise. He's 78 and we'll go, oh, just another old white guy. Yeah, he is another. He's old and he's white and he can't help any of those things, right? They are not through choice. So, but he's wise, and he kind of spoke about every disagreement doesn't need to be a war, you know? Every disagreement doesn't need to be a war. And so many people have got so many chips on their shoulder about so much that you're just like, relax, just relax. Everyone's so angry, and I think the way the world is just now with COVID and the stress of that, the worries that come with this, you know, whether you're educating your kids or worried about your job or on furlough, and that furlough is not enough for you to make ends meet, and there's a whole host that everybody, you know, you might have older relatives or whatever. Everyone's fighting their own battle just now. We're not just getting on with everyday life, which has its normal ups and downs. We're all stuck in a battle to get life back to normal, and the expectation of which normal life is be. And it's slowly transpiring that, yeah, you might get a vaccine, but you might still get COVID, but we won't be back living the life that we were living like a year ago, you know? So I think that's compounding it. Plus, you then add divisive politics like the Tories in power in Westminster. They're not Tories, they're real right wingers, you know, they're real hard hitters. The Trump administration and that divisiveness and that anger. You also, like, I mean, like today there was a headline in the Daily Mail, and it wasn't even a headline, it was like a banner underneath the title above the front page, because the front page was about Theresa May slagging off Boris Johnson. And the banner was, give us a lockdown roadmap, or give us a roadmap out of lockdown if you want us to be locked down, by Sarah Vine. Now, Sarah Vine is Michael Gove's wife. Do you know what I mean? And you're like, why? Right, so your husband has probably been in every meeting. Nicola Sturgeon's like, I'm never off the phone to that Michael Gove for the Four Nations call, because nobody knows where Boris is, because he's lying steaming at Chequers dressed as Santa. And you're like, what? Do you know what I mean? And that just stokes it. That absolutely. And then I seen another headline tonight, and it was like, don't book foreign holidays until 2022. And you're like, right, today is the 20th of January. Okay, the vaccine rollout is quite slow because it's dependent on manufacture. They have got target groups. They're trying to work their way through a population to get people vaccinated. By spring, we might all be back in the office again. By summer, we might be in the pubs or the beer gardens. By autumn, we might be inside the pubs. do you know, by Christmas, you might be hugging your mum. And it's just that, I know it's been a long slog, but it's not going to be where we are just now all the way through. It'll slowly get better. And I found that, I mean, Saturday I woke up and I was like, oh, it just feels like a Monday or a Tuesday. It doesn't feel like a Saturday, right? But I was pretty grumpy. And then I seen that picture of the Louisa Jordan administering vaccinations. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of hope. And I was like, right, and so it begins. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And one day, it's not going to be next year or the year after, it might be 3-4 years away. We're all like, do you remember we lived through a global pandemic and you're getting upset about a football team? Do you know what I mean? It's that.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to, as a human race, as a society, I think we need to be mindful of that.
Completely agree, and you've put that really well. I think one of the big things for me coming out of it is very much a need to value life more from people.
Very much live in the moment. I think you need to live in the moment more. I think we all, like, I don't mean you personally, I think we all do. We all need to be like, no, do you know what? No, we're not going to get a curry in. Let's go down to the pub and get a pint and a wee bite to eat. And we don't need to have a big session. Let's just sit and have dinner and not cook dinner tonight and not get a takeaway or whatever. And let's take a walk down to the pub and just get a natter and put our phones away.
Yeah, I think that's, you start to realise that a lot of the things that we talk about and kind of complain about aren't really real life issues, you know.
Yeah, whereas you're like, man, I can't wait to just pitch up at my mum and dad's and say, Mum, I'll take you for breakfast.
Exactly.
Come on, they'll just take you for breakfast, and we'll get a natter for an hour and a half.
You're definitely right, and I think this is definitely, like, for me as well, a big sign of, I know a lot of people that are really high risk, so the vaccine is like, we're all starting to go, maybe we're going to get to go to fair again, you know.
Yeah.
That's how extreme it's been for quite a lot of people, that they don't realise it. And you hear people that are like, well, it's just the disabled and elderly that are at risk, and you're like, well, that should be important though. Even if that was purely the case, it should still be important that we protect those people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at a point now where I've blocked so many comedians who are just like, yeah, I mean, the vulnerable don't come to gigs anyway. Let me on a stage, and you're like,
you're missing the point, isn't it?
I mean, I've got kids. I don't want to have to homeschool my kids. I've got two parents. One's had a lower left leg amputation. One doesn't have a spleen through cancer. I tell you what, how about you do a bit of homeschooling? I keep my parents locked up, and once we get through this, everyone's still alive.
See, that would be too. I think there's too many people saying these things about, because COVID isn't very serious, right? But there seems to be this idea of the lack of trust in government, the lack of trust in the way that we run things, and then you think that doesn't really have a major impact on a lot of people until there's a global pandemic, and you go, maybe we shouldn't vote Tories in the government.
I know, maybe that like whole underpinning the health service to try and sell it off cheap wasn't a great idea, Conservatives, because now you've broken it. You know, maybe putting Priti Patel in charge of anything was a terrible idea. You know, and listen, I don't think politicians are perfect. They are human after all. However, I do expect them to make a decision in what is best for the population and not their pockets. And that's all I ask. I'm not asking them to be anointed. I'm not asking them to behave like the Pope. I'm just asking them to make decisions that they believe is in the public's interest and not business. And they don't seem to be able to do that. So yeah, that's been very interesting. But I mean, we had a president tell us to put bleach in our veins, so I don't know.
I think they summed it up really well though. Like, it's not about, when we talk about politics, I'm always like, it doesn't matter to me whether you're left or right or wherever you are. It's all about if you're trying to help the public. That's what it's supposed to
But
be
if
about.
you're right wing, chances are you're not going to help the public. That's the whole thing, though, isn't it? It just seems to be a really weird connection that if you're a bit of a right winger, you're not really into helping.
Yes, well, this podcast, there's a big part of it that I talk, a big subject of it is mental health, right? And something I found really interesting about you that I wanted to touch on was my whole thing through being in a wheelchair was that I felt as if it kind of affected me and the way I looked at myself because of the way that society made me feel about it.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of things to deal with and kind of overcome, and now here we are doing a podcast. But I was reading about you having to deal with a lot of. I can't imagine what it's like to be a gay female comedian in Glasgow. That can't be the most wholesome thing.
Aye, I think. Aye, I mean, I think that's the thing. It's what you let define you, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, there's more to me than being a homosexual. It is a big part of my life because it ultimately directs what my interests are and what my who my other person is to spend time with and do stuff with. But I'm also a sister and an auntie and a kind of daughter-in-law and a daughter, and I'm an estimator just now because I'm back working, and I'm a pal. I'm a Celtic fan. I'm loads of things. Do you know what I mean? I think the thing with me is, like, I love Glasgow, right? And I love it warts and all. And I do love it warts and all because I think we as a city and as a culture, we don't really care about your sexuality. We don't really care about your gender. We don't really care about that stuff. We kind of judge you on who you are. We judge you on what comes out. So if you make us laugh, we'll like you. If you swear, we'll like you. If you take a drink, we'll like you. If you slag yourself, we'll like you. Like, if you can slag yourself, we'll then let you slag anything about us, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the way we are. And I think we're a warm city, we're a kind city. For all the poverty and the aggro and the social and the societal problems in the post-industrial city that is Glasgow, we're a good city and we're good people. And we're very similar to Belfast. We're very similar to Liverpool. We're very similar to Newcastle. You know, 3 out of them are port towns, you know, Irish immigration and stuff like that. So ultimately, we're the same people, just with a different dialect. But yeah, I mean, we're very, very similar, and we're good people. And as much as what there might be drugs and violence or whatever else, sectarianism and all that is prevalent in the city, we'll also go and buy somebody a cup of coffee if we see them sleeping in a doorway. You know, if you're in the off licence and you're getting a couple of drinks and there's an old boy and he's trying to get money together for his bottle of cider, you'll buy him the bottle of cider or you'll give him the pound that he needs because you're like, you know what, mate? It's a bottle of cider. Knock yourself out, man. That's what you need to get through today. Have it. And I think for all the hardness and the grit that's in this city, there is also a real compassion. And I think that's one of your most endearing things. So being a woman who's a gay, stand up, it's all right. It's all right. You know, I'm pretty working class. Do you know what I mean? So I'm kind of all right with that. You know, I know where I am in the scheme of this city, and I know where this city is in the scheme of the world, and I'm all right with that. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really lovely way you put that, actually. I was quite like, oh, that's amazing. I mean, like, because I think that's the way I've always felt about Glasgow, but just never really been able to articulate it the way you just did there. So
Yeah, it's a good city. It's a good city.
Especially if you're on the good and white side most of the time.
I will see. We'll see what the next 10 years are going to bring. Oh.
Would you be the next Celtic manager if they offered you the job?
Aye. No bother, man. I've put better teams together in FIFA than what he's put together. Oh, don't get me started. Don't get me started. Don't get me started. Don't get me started.
We won't get into that. We'll get to that. But in a lot of ways, you've kind of led the forefront of some, by being, because one of the big things I always talk about is the reason in doing something like this podcast for me was when I was growing up in a wheelchair, you never really seen anyone in a wheelchair doing anything. We weren't in movies, we weren't in sports, we're not on the telly, and so you get this idea of like there's not really anything I'm going to be able to do that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be able to kind of do that for people, and hopefully that inspires somebody else that's in a wheelchair to do a podcast or go to the gym or do anything that they think they can do. Do you feel like does that ever occur to you that you could be doing that for other people as well?
No, I think I have a responsibility as a human being to make life better for the next generation. So I think, like, for me, see, what's weird is I grew up in a time, right? So I was born in 1980. So I grew up in a time that for the first 10 years of my life, I had the Queen and the Prime Minister who were both women. So I think when you see that, right, and like very, like Thatcher was a very kind of commanding, full front, on the news all the time kind of figure. Do you know what I mean? So I think that was just a thing. And then as you get older, you start to see things and you put things together in the world and you're going, wait a minute, that's not right. And I think for me, I always think that if you can do something now, you've made it easier for someone who comes behind you. You've just kind of treaded the path a bit. So for me, I'm a gay female Glaswegian stand-up comedian, so you would automatically say, oh, well, Susan Calman would be the role model there. But the actual truth is it's Janie Godley, because Janie's voice and my voice are similar, as in we come from the same place. And if Janie hadn't done what she's been doing for the best part of, maybe 18, 20 years, there is no way I could do what I do on a stage. So I think we've all got a responsibility, regardless of if you're white, black, yellow, brown, pink, trans, gay, non-binary, heterosexual, whatever you are. I think you've always got to kind of smooth a path for the next person. My path's all right, I had an analogue childhood and a digital adulthood, I'm pretty lucky. I had a house with central heating. I had a house with that. My mum had a house with a fire. Do you know what I mean? So it gets better, and I think that's all I can really hope for.
Yeah, totally agree. What you said about Jean Godley there was interesting because I feel like I always see her get loads of abuse from people.
Listen, she has off her big shoulders, does her Janie, right? Yeah, she'll just upset people because of her, whether it be her politics or her views, and she upsets a particular kind of demographic of person, and she's aware of that. And again, it's the whole social media, trolling, hiding behind your keyboard, saying to women, "You're this, you're that," and a lot of it's other women as well. So yeah, it's very much that, and it's stuff that they would never ever say to a guy. But if you want to go toe to toe with Janie, knock yourself out, because she will absolutely end you, and she has got the biggest heart, and she's a very good woman. And you know what? She's a brilliant, brilliant comedian. I've never seen Janie not be able to do a room. Never. Any room. Corporate, comedy club, wee tiny basement in a boozer on a Tuesday night, doesn't matter. Janie can do that.
And that really tells you something, because you can't say that about many comedians.
No, absolutely brilliant. Children's comedy, adult comedy, comedy in Australia, comedy in the UK, comedy in London, anywhere, Janie can do it. So, absolutely.
Is there any comedians coming up now that you think are going to be at that level? Yourself and Jane?
I don't think you can put me in the same level as Janie, but she's very much my comedy mum. But it's been really difficult because we've not gigged for a year. So do you know what I mean? You've not seen, because normally what happens is you come through and there's quite a quick, trajectory, and you go, oh, they're good, and you kind of see them more and more regular, and you see them grow. So I wouldn't say there's been anybody a real standout, purely because we haven't gigged. And it's very difficult to go, well, they were good when I seen them. So if I seen them like a year ago, but chances are it was maybe a year and a half ago.
Yeah, probably.
So you then they're like, I gave up comedy, man. You're like, all right, okay, you were decent. So yeah, I can't say that there's anybody I can go, both, that's the guy, that's the next one.
What do you think the first gig back's going to be like when everybody's back in and it's?
And it's great. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be electric. Comedians will be getting carried out in the shoulders of the audience. The audience will be amazing. It'll be great. It'll just be amazing. It'll be electric. It'll be absolutely electric.
I can't be great. I'm going to get to one of your shows when I can. Make sure.
Hopefully, aye.
Make sure you get someone that has a rap now.
That's it. Defo, mate. Defo, buddy.
No, I really enjoyed this. It flew by. You made it dead easy for me, and it was a good laugh.
Listen, thanks for having me on, Kieran. It was great. And if you need a hand plugging it or anything, just drop me a line, mate, and we'll sort something out, all right?
I appreciate that very much. You have a good night.
No bother, pal. No bother. Listen, you take care of yourself, and fingers crossed for the night. I don't know if I want his beat so he gets a sack. Right. Take care, mate. Anything I can do, let me know, all right, pal?
Will do, mate. Thank you very much.
Cheers, buddy. Bye-bye. Bye.